false promise, every manipulative agreement, every time they pretended to represent you while throwing your name into pits of gossip, envy, and exploitation. It registered in the spirit, and now they're learning the hard way. What they took lightly was sacred. What they disrespected was divinely protected. You weren't weak, you were covered. And now that divine covering is moving, not to speak for you, but to respond for you in ways they never saw coming. Number 8, you were the Ark of the Covenant, and they touched you with dirty hands. They had no clue who they were dealing with. You weren't just another kind soul. You weren't just someone with deep insight, good energy, or a beautiful presence. You were sacred territory. You were the Ark walking among them, a carrier of divine presence, a vessel soaked in suffering, refined in fire, and sealed by God for a purpose far greater than their understanding. But instead of approaching you with reverence, they came with arrogance, with ego, with hidden agendas. They reached for you with unclean hands, thinking your spirit was just another place to grab from, drain, and toss aside when convenient. They didn't take time to ask, should I even be near this person? They didn't pause to ask God, is this someone I'm meant to serve, not use? Instead, they treated your presence like it was common, something to handle carelessly, access freely, and speak on loosely. But biblically, when the ark was mishandled, when people touched it without divine permission, they were struck down immediately, no explanation, no warning. That's the level of holiness it carried, and here's what they never understood. You carry that same fire. You walk around looking normal, talking normal, but your spirit is laced with the residue of heaven. Every heartbreak you survived, every betrayal you endured, every tear you never shared, it all became oil, and that oil became a seal. And when they mishandled you, they weren't just disrespecting a person, they were violating a divine appointment. They touched something consecrated, and now their lives are testifying against them. Doors are closing, chaos is following them, relationships are crumbling. They're stuck in patterns they can't escape, because divine presence isn't neutral. It either blesses or it exposes. And the moment they dishonored you, they shifted the atmosphere around themselves. The covering that came with you lifted. The grace that surrounded them when they were near you, gone. And all that's left is consequence. Because what they mishandled wasn't just you. It was the living presence of the Most High, moving through flesh. And heaven doesn't let that kind of disrespect go unanswered. Number 9, they thought they could offer you like bait, not knowing you were the sword. They thought they were running the game, thought they could use your name as bait to attract attention, influence, or favors. They dangled the idea of you, your presence, your energy, your heart, like it was some prize behind a velvet rope, and they had the keys. They told people, I can get you close. They trust me. They'll listen to me. Whether it was for romance, clout, spiritual access, or just plain ego, they used the idea of being connected to you like currency. But what they didn't know, and what they couldn't see coming, is that you weren't the bait. You were the sword. You're not the kind of person someone gets close to by manipulation. You don't just hand your spirit over because someone made a few flattering promises or played the right social game. You carry discernment that slices through surface level charm like paper. You see beyond words. You sense hidden motives, and when someone shows up with a secret agenda, no matter how pretty the packaging, you don't get pulled in. You cut through, not out of malice, but out of divine instinct. And that instinct is sharp. So now the people who tried to offer you like you were some sort of bait are dealing with the fallout. The people they lured in with your name, gone, disappointed, confused, relationships ruined, connections severed, their influence damaged. Because those false promises didn't just collapse, they backfired. When people use the name of someone covered in divine fire for selfish reasons, that fire doesn't bless them, it burns them. They thought they were playing matchmaker, gatekeeper, spiritual liaison, but they were out here using your identity as bait in a trap they set for themselves. Now all that name dropping, all those whispered suggestions, all that scheming, it's catching up to them. Because your name carried weight in the spirit, and they used it in vain. They didn't realize that when they offered you like an opportunity, heaven saw it as an insult. You're not a pawn, you're a sword. And now they're learning the hard way that when you play with the sword carelessly, The first person it cuts is you. Number 10, they let snakes in your garden. Now their house is overrun with poison. They knew exactly who you were, a nurturer, a healer, a sanctuary in human form. Your presence was peace. Your space was pure. But instead of protecting that, they opened the gates. Not out of ignorance, but out of ego, out of selfish ambition. They let people into your garden who had no business being anywhere near you. People with envy in their hearts, hidden agendas in their hands, and poison on their tongues. And they did it knowingly, thinking those connections would elevate them. That by aligning with darkness, they'd gain power. That using your light as leverage would somehow make them important. They thought they were being strategic. They thought they were in control. But what they invited wasn't opportunity. It was infestation. Because the spirits they let in weren't coming to admire the garden. They came to tear it apart, to drain it, contaminate it. They came as friends, lovers, business partners, spiritual seekers. But underneath all of that were demons dressed in good intentions. And instead of standing in the gap for you, the very people who claimed to protect you sold out your garden for personal gain. Now, those same snakes have turned on them. The spirits they once entertained are now in their house, twisting their relationships, breaking their peace, hissing in their sleep, biting them with the very venom they unleashed into your life. They're watching their lives unravel, not realizing it's tied to who they allowed to walk freely through sacred space. Because when you give a snake access to a garden it didn't build, it doesn't just sit quietly, it reproduces. They betrayed your sanctuary and now they're living in a spiritual quarantine. Every time they try to build, something crumbles. Every time they trust, it backfires. They're paranoid, anxious, spiritually attacked because the poison didn't stay where they left it. It followed them home. And here's the part they'll never say out loud. They regret it. They know they should have protected you. They know they should have closed the gate. Because now the garden they defiled is flourishing without them. And the house they tried to build with snakes is collapsing under their own deception. Number 11, they used you as a shortcut to the divine, and now God's blocked their path. They saw your connection to God and thought, this is my chance, not to know him for themselves, but to piggyback off of you, to use your intimacy, your obedience, your spiritual clarity as a way to bypass their own process. They weren't seeking truth, they were seeking a shortcut. And you, the chosen one, became their backdoor to what they didn't want to work for. They came close, not out of reverence, but out of strategy. You were their spiritual cheat code, someone they could stand next to and suddenly feel chosen too. They mimicked your language, repeated your insights, used your discernment as if it was theirs. And while they may have fooled some people, they never fooled heaven. Because in the kingdom, access doesn't come from association, it comes from obedience. And obedience can't be faked. God watched them use your presence like a ladder. Every time they hit a wall, they came running to you for revelation. Every time they were exposed, they leaned on your wisdom to escape accountability. They wanted your oil without your crushing. They wanted divine favor without divine discipline, but that's not how heaven works. So slowly, silently, God began to block the path they thought they could steal. Now they can't hear like they used to. Their prayers feel empty, their visions are cloudy, doors that used to open now stay sealed. Because the anointing they borrowed from you was never theirs to begin with. And the realms they once felt close to are now locked down, not out of punishment, but out of justice. Because God will not let a counterfeit rise on the back of someone else's sacrifice. They thought they were getting ahead by using you. What they were actually doing was setting themselves up for spiritual exile. Because divine shortcuts always lead to locked doors, and now they're outside the gates, not just of your life, but of divine access. And the worst part, they don't know how to get back in, because the password wasn't your name, it was purity, it was obedience, it was sacrifice. And those are things you can't borrow, you have to earn them. Number 12, they lied and said you needed them, just to convince others you were beneath them. They couldn't handle your light, so they tried to dim it before others ever got the chance to see it. They knew if you stood alone, truly alone, unapologetically in your essence, people would start asking questions. They'd start noticing your strength, your wisdom, your peace. And worse, they'd stop seeing them as the necessary middlemen. So instead of admitting that they feared your potential, They chose to rewrite your story in their favor. They lied.